Recognizing the MLA from Kelowna Centre.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, today I rise not only as a member of this House, but as someone who has spent a lifetime in the communities that this government continues to overlook. I rise for the families of British Columbia, families who have done everything right, who pay their taxes, who contribute to their communities, and who have not been met with partnership, but with indifference. Today we are debating Bill 5, the Budget Measures Implementation Act, a bill that on its surface might appear technical, procedural, even routine. But, Honourable Speaker, let's not be fooled by its thin form. This bill speaks of volumes, not just in what it contains, but in what it leaves out. Bill 5 is meant to implement the financial roadmap this government laid out just weeks ago. But that roadmap is already broken. The numbers in this budget no longer reflect reality. The fiscal context has changed. The province is staring down a $14.3 billion projected deficit. 2 credit downgrades have already hit, and British Columbians are left asking, who is going to pay the price? The answer, Mr. Speaker, is clear. It won't be the Premier's office. It won't be the insiders getting $1,000 a day consulting contracts. It won't be the former employers of the finance minister receiving $45 million tax breaks. It will be the working family in Kelowna, scraping together enough to cover the utilities. It will be the senior in Kimberley facing a $64,000 infrastructure assessment just to keep their tap water clean. It will be the small town parent walking their child nearly 5 kilometres to school because there's no bus service and no sidewalk. Bill 5 is a failure, not because it lacks polish, but because it lacks purpose. It does not meet the moment. It does not reflect the real needs of British Columbians. It is outdated, it is out of touch, and it is out of time. We are told this bill reflects the government's fiscal vision, but Mr. Speaker, if that is true, this government needs glasses. There's no plan to address the infrastructure collapse facing rural communities. No plan to address skyrocketing food costs. No plan to address service erosion in our schools or hospital, and no plan to get this province back on solid financial footing. What we see instead is a government so busy managing optics that it's forgotten how to manage outcomes. Honourable Speaker, British Columbians deserve better than this bill offers. And over the next few minutes, I intend to lay out exactly why Bill 5 fails. Not just as legislation, but as a statement of values, as a reflection of priorities, and as a test of leadership. Honourable Speaker, let's begin where most British Columbians, or many British Columbians, are feeling it, at the kitchen table. This government likes to talk about kitchen table priorities, but Bill 5 makes it painfully clear whose kitchen table they're talking about. Because from where I'm standing, it's not the table of a single mom trying to pay off her groceries while rent climbs by the month. It's not the table of seniors weighing heating costs against medication. No, this bill is written from the kitchen table of an office tower in downtown Vancouver, where lobbyists have easy access and affordability is just a buzzword. Honourable Speaker, the truth is this: affordability is slipping further out of the reach of British Columbians. Last week in Kelowna Centre, 3 separate senior men sought shelter for the first time in their lives. They sought shelter because they were homeless. Not one of them, none of them, had a drug problem. Each one had lived a productive and responsible life, but they now found themselves without a home in their senior years and in British Columbia. At a time in their lives when they shouldn't need to worry, this province and this government has let them down. Food bank usage, It's up 353% in Kelowna since 2019. That's staggering and heartbreaking. The fastest growing demographic for using the food bank is working families. And year over year, food bank usage is increasing by 59% in the Central Okanagan. 70% of food bank users are the working class. Let that sink in for a second. These are the productive citizens in our communities, the families who are struggling to make ends meet. Honourable Speaker, affordability is slipping further out of reach for British Columbians, and this bill does nothing to bring it back. Instead of offering relief, it actually makes life more expensive. It raises taxes on electric used vehicles that working families invested in to lower their fuel cost and to do their part for the environment. The government told them, go green and we'll have your back. And now those same families are being punished for taking that advice. This isn't just policy confusion, it's a betrayal. And let's talk about the new tax on parking in Metro Vancouver. In a region already plagued by sky-high parking rates, the government has declared that it's time to make things even harder. Who asked for this? Who benefits from this? It certainly isn't the small business owner who parks downtown every day to open their store. It's not the young parent who needs to drive to a medical appointment. And it's not the delivery driver trying to make ends meet while gas and insurance skyrocket. This is a government that says, shop local, while taxing local businesses into the ground. A government that says it wants to help commuters while driving up the cost of getting to work. And while they do this, they squeeze every dollar out of the middle class. They still find a way to hand out $45 million in new tax credits to the film industry. Not, by the way, to the camera operator in Kamloops, not to the crew in Penticton, but to major productions, the ones with lawyers and consultants who know how to maximize the perks. We know how hard the last few years and this government has been on small business. The struggle is pronounced and obvious. We watch small businesses struggle and shutter their doors far too often. During my campaign, one of my favorite coffee shops closed. In fact, my campaign team was meeting in this coffee shop right up until they shut down. Between the downtown crime, the drug use and bad behavior, and the heightened property costs, their lease became unaffordable. In an interview, the owner cited a chair being thrown through the window of his business, combined with lewd behaviors as deterrents and costs to his business. Ultimately, these things, combined with new lease terms, made his busy coffee shop more of a hassle or a liability than a thriving business. Mr. Speaker, small businesses need support. They need to be set free from the crushing tax, burdensome regulation, and a government that overinvests in public services. It baffles me that this government thinks that the public sector can support its own weight. The private sector, small business, is the backbone of the economy and always has been. We need to correct course now. Mr. Speaker, there's not a single tax cut in this bill, not one. In fact, without tax cuts, this government has led us into massive deficits and budget shortfalls. Our schools are being affected. Our children's education, their learning, and their futures. Kamloops School District is facing a $6 million budget shortfall, and they are considering freezing board salaries and cutting nearly 80 jobs. Kelowna is facing a $5.2 million budget shortfall. Kelowna is up to 112% capacity. It was 108 last year, and relies heavily on costly portables as temporary classrooms. And Surrey is facing a $16 million budget shortfall. They are faced with reducing bus service for students and closing learning centres. No help for our students watching another portable moved onto their school playground. No help for families watching grocery bills rise by hundreds of dollars. No help for the senior on a fixed income. No help for small-town entrepreneurs trying to stay afloat. British Columbians are asked to shoulder more and more, while getting less and less in return. Honorable Speaker, people are not asking for the moon. They're asking for relief. They're asking for fairness, and they're asking for leadership. And on that front, this bill fails entirely. Honorable Speaker, we cannot have a conversation about Bill 5 without confronting one of its most glaring omissions, our infrastructure crisis. In communities across this province, residents are facing impossible challenges: boil water advisories, crumbling sewer systems, collapsing dikes, and roads so neglected they are functionally unsafe. And what does Bill 5 offer them? Not a single mention, not a single clause, and not a single dollar. In Kelowna, the city's given up on a second bridge. Whether you agree or not, or whether the city always wanted this or not, one thing is clear. They are believing the message of this province and the message of this government, when the government has proven they are unwilling and uninterested in supporting infrastructure. Money for a second bridge? Not on this government's watch. Take the community near Skaha Lake, where 321 homeowners are facing a water and sewer collapse. They've been told it will cost over $20 million to repair. That's more than $64,000 per household. These are seniors. These are families. They are people who did everything right, and now they're being asked to choose between taking on life-altering debt or walking away from their homes with no equity left. You know what they were told, Mr. Speaker? That because their water system is managed by an improvement district, they don't qualify for basic grant programs. That the system is outside of scope. These people pay taxes, they vote, they contribute, but they're invisible to this government. And what about transportation? In Princeton, kids are walking nearly 5 kilometers along unplowed highways just to get to school. No sidewalks, no bus service, and no alternative. These kids can actually say they walk to school for miles in the snow, and it's 2025. This is not just about education, it's about basic safety. Where in Bill 5 is the funding to fix this? Where is the plan to bring rural transportation into the 21st century? Let's be clear, this isn't about asking for special treatment. This is about fairness. It's about being seen. We have towns that want to build new homes, but they can't get permits because their sewer systems are maxed out. Municipalities that want to grow, but they can't secure the infrastructure needed to support development. Communities where fire suppression systems failed under pressure because the pipes are too old. And yet, in this Budget Measures Implementation Act, the legislation meant to operationalize the government's budget, there is no structural reform, no funding framework, no acknowledgement that this crisis exists. Honorable Speaker, we cannot build homes if the ground beneath them is broken. We cannot invite people to settle in regions where the water isn't safe and the roads are impassable. We cannot call ourselves a forward-looking province when we're ignoring the foundational infrastructure that makes life possible. This government has spent months talking about housing, about density, about rapid permitting, but density without infrastructure is a fantasy. And permitting without water and sewer and transit capacity is a shell game. Bill 5 could have recognized this. It could have tied infrastructure grants to realistic housing targets. It could have introduced procurement reform to allow rural contractors a fair shot at bidding. It could have set the stage for growth. Instead, it offers silence. And for the communities who are paying the price for that silence, this bill is not just a disappointment, it's an insult. Honorable Speaker, the relationship between the provincial government and the local municipalities, it should be built on trust, on partnership, and on respect for the realities on the ground. But what we see in Bill 5 and in this government's entire approach to governance is the opposite. Top-down mandates, one-size-fits-all policies, and expectations that local governments must deliver with shrinking resources and zero support. Municipalities are being ordered to densify, build faster, approve more homes. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, I support the goal of increasing housing supply. I absolutely do. But the problem is not ambition, the problem is execution. You cannot build new homes on broken foundations. You cannot expect communities to grow when the water lines can't keep up and the sewer systems are at capacity. You can't expect them to grow when the energy system is not able to keep up. And you can't expect British Columbians to feel satisfied with this life in this province when they've neither been asked for their opinion nor supported in the process. This government says build more, but they won't fund the infrastructure needed to support that growth. Bill 5 could have introduced cost-sharing frameworks. It could have reformed the funding model for infrastructure grants. It could have acknowledged that small towns and rural communities need support if they're to meet the demands placed on them. But instead, we get silence again. And what happens when municipalities can't deliver? The government points fingers. They blame local delays. They say communities are getting in the way. It's disingenuous, it's dishonest, and it's deeply unfair. Mr. Speaker, this disconnect has real consequences. We see it in the gaps in school transportation. We see it in the absence of long-term planning for rural transit, and we see it in the towns where a single emergency room closure means the next available hospital is hours away. We see it in the volunteer firefighters, municipal planners, and public works crews who are doing more with less every single day. Well, this government pats itself on the back for historic investments, and they never make it past the press release. Where is the support for towns actually delivering the growth this government claims to want? Where is the respect for local leadership, the people closest to the challenges who are being completely left out of the solutions? Honourable Speaker, there's no mention in this bill of municipal cost pressures, no commitment to improving grant eligibility for communities that fall through the cracks, no reforms to procurement so that local contractors, engineers, and suppliers can actually win public projects in their own backyards. Instead, the government continues to write policy in a vacuum, where Metro Vancouver is the default and every other region is expected to adapt or fall behind. We need collaboration, not command. We need investment, not indifference. And we need a government that sees municipal leaders not as obstacles, but as allies in delivering results. Bill 5 fails to recognize any of this. Mr. Speaker, if there is one issue that cuts across every household, every age group, and every region in this province, it is healthcare. And yet here we are debating a bill that purports to implement the government's fiscal vision for the year ahead. And there's not one meaningful commitment to healthcare equity, access, or capacity in it. What does it say about a government that can find room in the budget to expand tax credits for elite sectors, but not for the people who are waiting weeks for a family doctor or spending hours in emergency rooms if they can find one open? In Kelowna and countless other ridings across British Columbia, we are seeing ER closures with little to no notice. Paramedics are stretched beyond capacity. Walk-in clinics are shutting down, and specialists, well, they might as well be a myth in many parts of the province. Bill 5 does nothing to address this. There are no incentives in this legislation to retain rural healthcare workers, no reforms to attract doctors and nurses to underserved communities. No investment in mobile clinics or expanded telehealth or regional healthcare models that reflect the geographic diversity of our province. We hear a lot about universal access, but Mr. Speaker, universal means nothing when it isn't actually available. Seniors are being discharged from hospitals without adequate supports. Young families are paying out of pocket for mental health services that should be publicly funded. Communities are fundraising for basic medical equipment while this government throws money at politically convenient industries and headline-grabbing announcements. Bill 5 could be an opportunity to set a new tone. It could have included funding models for integrated care in rural areas. It could have implemented tax credits for healthcare professionals who choose to practice in underserved regions. It could have made meaningful investments in long-term care so that families aren't forced to send their loved ones hundreds of kilometers away just to receive basic care. Instead, this government has turned its back. Affordability is not just about food and fuel, it's about access to care when you need it. And right now, that access is deeply unequal. Mr. Speaker, we do not have a healthcare system. We have a healthcare lottery. And if you happen to live in the right postal code, you win. But if you live in a rural area, or if you're low income, or if you rely on transit to get an appointment, you are out of luck. This bill ignores that inequity. It allows it to fester. And that alone is reason enough to vote it down. Honourable Speaker, perhaps nothing in this bill illustrates the government's misplaced priority more than its treatment of the film industry. Let me be clear, I support the film industry. I know the value it brings to our economy, our communities, and our cultural landscape. But what I also know is this: if you want an industry to thrive, you have to pair smart incentives with smart strategy. What we see in Bill 5 is the opposite. This government is expanding film tax credits, adding an additional 5% credit for qualified BC labour expenditures, and extending regional incentives for animation studios. That might sound positive on paper, but we need to ask, where is the corresponding support for the industries that have no lobbyist on call? Where is the targeted relief for forestry communities hit by mill closures? For ranchers crushed by drought? For small processors and regional exporters who are the backbone of our economy? They've been left behind again. Sorry. Worse still, Honourable Speaker, this government is actively undermining its own efforts. When you create an environment of economic and political instability, when you target specific segments of American society with performative rhetoric, you make BC less attractive as a filming destination. And that's not conjecture, that is experience. During the 2008 recession, productions fled this province. They will do so again if we continue down this path. At a time of rising costs and shrinking margins, why would international producers choose BC over other jurisdictions, if they sense political hostility, regulatory confusion, or tax unpredictability? This government cannot have it both ways, claiming to support an industry while alienating the very people who keep it running. But, Honourable Speaker, this is only one part of the problem, because while the government funds tax credits and spin campaigns, our province's fiscal health is deteriorating. Bill 5 is based on a budget that no longer holds. When the Finance Minister tabled it, she already knew 2 credit downgrades were on the way. She knew the deficit forecast was no longer accurate, and she proceeded anyways, without disclosing the risk, without a plan to mitigate it, and without any structural reforms to restore confidence. Now, BC is looking at a projected $14.3 billion deficit. That's $14.3 billion in debt that our children and grandchildren will be responsible for. And every credit downgrade means higher borrowing costs, more expensive infrastructure projects, and less flexibility for future budgets. I'm worried about my children's future. This is not a spreadsheet problem. This is a public service problem. Every dollar that goes towards debt is a dollar not spent on schools. It's a dollar not spent on hospitals. And it's a dollar not spent on clean drinking water or rural roads. And what does Bill 5 do in response to this financial cliff? Nothing. no debt management strategy, no long-term spending plan, no fiscal guardrails, just politics, just photo ops, just more of the same. Leadership is not about pretending things are fine when they're not. It's about making tough decisions early, not waiting until the crisis hits. But this government reacts instead of plans. It scrambles instead of leads. And it's the people of British Columbia who are left holding the bill. I'm so tired of hearing that we have a strong economy because it only takes a moment and a pair of eyes to notice the holes in that statement. Honourable Speaker, at the heart of this debate is not just a fiscal document, it's a question of leadership. British Columbians are not asking for more programs, they're not asking for more consultants or task forces or talking points. They're asking for someone to stand up and say enough. Enough delay, enough deflection, and enough neglect. They want to be heard and they want to be seen. And above all, they want a government that acts, not just when the polls drop or the headlines shift, but when it's hard and when it matters and when lives are on the line. Honourable Speaker, this government has forgotten what leadership looks like. Leadership means anticipating challenges, not reacting to crises alone. It means investing in infrastructure before it fails. It means prioritizing long-term stability over short-term optics. And it means listening to those who don't have a lobbyist, who don't hold a press conference, but who still get up every day and hold this province together. This bill fails that test. Bill 5 is not just a missed opportunity. It's a mirror reflecting the priorities of a government that has lost its way. It shows us a province where insiders are rewarded while families are taxed more, where consultants are hired while seniors face disconnection notices, while seniors face homelessness, where school buses don't run, but press releases do. It's a budget bill with no vision, a fiscal plan with no anchor, a government initiative with no grounding in the lived reality of British Columbians. And Honourable Speaker, that is why I cannot support it. This House is changing. Rural voices are rising, and people who've been left behind are no longer silent, and they will not be ignored. The Conservative caucus is here because our constituents sent us here, because they are tired of being told to do more with less. They are tired of hearing excuses while infrastructure crumbles and while taxes rise and while services fail. We don't need more management, we need leadership. We don't need more bureaucracy, we need action. And we will keep standing day in and day out until the needs of every region, every industry, and every family in this province are respected and addressed. Honourable Speaker, British Columbians deserve better than Bill 5. They deserve a government that governs for all, not just the few. They deserve fairness, foresight, and fiscal discipline. And they deserve a future built on substance, not spin. Until we see that kind of government, we will continue to hold this one accountable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.